Every serious hunting family has a meat pole. Maybe it's a dedicated post or rack, purpose-built, set in the shade on the north side of the barn. Maybe it's a timber frame with a gambrel hook that gets moved into position after a successful hunt. Maybe it's what it is on most of the old farms in these Virginia mountains, a particular tree. A tree that the family has been using for so long that the bark has the marks of it, that the branch overhead is polished smooth where the ropes have run over it for decades, that every child who grew up on that property knows exactly what the tree is for and has watched the ritual enacted under it since before they could fully understand what they were watching. The meat pole is where the hunt ends and the work begins. It is where a field-dressed deer is hung to cool and age in the November air before the butchering. It is where the family gathers and the skill gets passed and the children learn, in the most direct way possible, the relationship between the animal and the table and the land that produced both. It is one of the most intimate spaces in a hunting family's life. It is home ground. It is supposed to be safe. Roy Dunmore's family has been hanging deer from the same white oak on their Bland County property since his grandfather was a young man. 4 generations, 100 years of harvests from that tree. Roy is 81 years old, and he has known that tree his entire life, and he has hung his own deer from it, and watched his children hang their deer from it, and watched his grandchildren learn under it the same way he learned under it. 3 years ago, he found something hanging from it that he had not hung. He cut it down and buried it. He told no one. The following November, it happened again, and his granddaughter saw it from the kitchen window before he could reach the tree. This is the meat pole. Virginia, blood and bone. The most frightening things don't come from the woods. They come to what you love most. The Dunmore farm occupied 112 acres in the eastern part of Bland County, where the Walker Mountain ridgeline broke into a series of lower spurs, and the bottomland along the creek was rich enough to have supported 4 generations of mixed farming: cattle, row crops, a substantial kitchen garden, and the hunting that supplemented all of it. Roy Dunmore's grandfather had bought the land in 1908. His father had added the back 40 in 1941. Roy had inherited it at 32 when his father died of a stroke and had farmed it with his wife Margaret for 49 years until Margaret died and Roy's son Dale and his wife moved back from Wiveville to help with the operation. Roy was still physically capable. He moved slowly but surely, the deliberate economy of motion that came from 8 decades of manual work on the same land, and he remained the farm's center of gravity, the person around whom everyone and everything else oriented. Dale hunted. Dale's wife hunted. Their daughter Lena, 17 now, had started hunting with her father at 12 and had taken her first deer at 13, a clean shot, a doe, recovered quickly, hung on the white oak the same afternoon. Roy had been there. He had put his hand on her shoulder and said what his grandfather had said to his father, and his father had said to him: "Good shot, clean kill, the animal fed well and lived clean and gave itself to the family." That is what hunting is. Do it with the same respect every time. Lena had nodded seriously, and Roy had believed she understood. The white oak was at the northwest corner of the property, at the edge of the tree line where the pasture met the timber. It was a large tree. Roy estimated its age at 120 years, maybe more, with a main branch that jutted horizontally at about 14 feet, the perfect height for a hanging gambrel over a flat section of ground that had been cleared and graded at some point in the farm's history to make the work easier. The bark of that branch was worn smooth in 2 places where the ropes ran. The ground beneath it was packed hard with a century of the same use. Every successful deer season ended at that tree. It was as much a part of the farm as the house. Roy found it on a Tuesday evening in late October, 3 years ago. He had not been hunting that day. His knees had been bad since August, and he had given himself the week off from the pre-season scouting that he normally would have been doing. He had been in the equipment shed when the dogs started. The Dunmore farm kept 2 beagles, Working dogs, rabbit and small game hunters, kept in a pen near the equipment shed. They barked when deer entered the pasture, and they barked when strangers drove up the lane, and they barked occasionally at nothing, the way dogs did. Roy had long since learned to distinguish between the barks. This bark was different. Not the casual, investigative bark of dogs who had scented something interesting, not the excited run bark of dogs who had jumped a rabbit. The bark of dogs who were alarmed. The bark of dogs who had encountered something that frightened them. Roy wiped his hands on his shop rag and went out. The dogs were pressed against the back of their pen as far as they could get from the direction of the white oak. They were not running the fence. They were not lunging. They were crowded into the back corner of the pen, low and pressed together, eyes fixed on the northwest corner of the property. He looked in that direction. Something was hanging from the white oak's main branch. He walked to the tree. The evenings in late October came fast in the Bland County bottomland, the sun behind the Walker Mountain Ridge by 4:30, the light going gray and dim within 20 minutes of that. He had his flashlight from the shop, and he raised it as he approached. He stopped 10 feet from the tree. He looked at what was hanging from the branch for a long time. Then he went to the equipment shed and got his knife and a shovel. He cut it down. He buried it in the far corner of the back pasture, deep enough that nothing would dig it up. He said nothing to Dale or Karen or Lena when he went inside for dinner. He sat at his family's table and ate the meal that Karen had made and answered the questions that were asked of him and offered nothing beyond what was asked. He lay awake for a long time that night. He will not describe what he cut down from the tree. He has said only this: it was hung with care. It was hung in the exact manner of a field-dressed deer, the same rope configuration, the same gambrel position, the same orientation. Whatever had hung it knew exactly how deer were hung on that tree and had replicated the method precisely. It was not a deer. He had hoped, through the spring and summer and into the following fall, that it had been a single occurrence. Something had used the tree once. He had removed what it left. He had told no one. Perhaps that was the end of it. The second occurrence was on a Friday evening in the second week of November. Deer season had been open for 2 weeks. Dale had taken a doe on the opening Saturday, and it had hung on the white oak for 3 days before they butchered it. The tree was empty now, the gambrel cleaned and hung on its hook on the barn wall. Lena was in the kitchen after school, starting dinner because Karen was working late. She looked out the kitchen window. The kitchen window faced northwest, directly toward the white oak. Roy was in the front room reading when she called him. Not screamed, called, in a voice that was controlled in the way that 14-year-old voices were sometimes controlled when the person inside them was working hard to stay controlled. "Grandpa? Come here." He came to the kitchen. She was standing at the window with her back to him, looking out. "There's something on the meat pole," she said. He looked past her through the glass. Something was hanging from the branch in the last gray light of the November afternoon. "Go upstairs," he said. "Grandpa?" "Lena? Upstairs, now." She went. He watched her feet on the stairs, making sure she was going, and then he put on his coat and his boots, and he got his flashlight and his knife, and he went out to the tree. He cut it down and buried it the same as the first time, same corner of the back pasture, same depth. His knees protested the digging, and he finished in the dark, breathing hard, and he stood over the disturbed ground for a moment before going back inside. Lena was at the top of the stairs when he came in. "What was it?" she said. "Nothing you need to worry about," he said. "I saw it from the window. I was looking at it for a minute before I called you." He looked at her. It was hung on the tree like a deer, the same way, but it wasn't a deer. "No," he said. "What was it?" He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know," he said, which was not entirely true. He had been thinking about the first one for a year, and he had arrived at some understanding, and it was not the understanding he would have chosen. Has it happened before? She said. He looked at her. She was 14 years old and had taken her first deer the year before and had done it cleanly and had stood under this tree and listened to what he told her about hunting and the land and the animal. She was the 4th generation of this family on this land. She had the right to know what the land was doing. Once before, he said. Last October. I cut it down then too. She absorbed that. Is it dangerous? She said. I don't know. And that was entirely true. Are you going to tell Dale? He thought about Dale, his son, a practical man, a good hunter, and the kind of man who handled things by addressing them directly. Dale would want to set a camera. Dale would want to call the game warden or the county or some authority. Not yet, he said. I need to understand it better before I involve anyone else. Lena looked at the window, at the dark outside where the tree was. Whatever it is, she said, it knows how to use the tree. It hung whatever it hung the right way, like it had watched us. Yes, Roy said. That means it's been here a while, watching. That's what I've been thinking about, he said. He spent the winter and the following spring doing what he had done his entire life when a problem needed solving, thinking about it carefully, gathering whatever information was available, and arriving at a conclusion he could live with. He was not an educated man in the formal sense. He had finished high school and gone straight to the farm and never left. But he had been on this land for 8 decades, and he had learned the land the way you learn something you paid close attention to for 80 years. And what he knew about this specific farm and this specific piece of Bland County terrain was deep and detailed in ways that no outside education could have produced. He thought about the white oak. He thought about what his grandfather had told him about the white oak. His grandfather had said, "The tree was old when I bought the land. The people I bought from said it had been a marker tree, a boundary marker for the original survey. One of the trees blazed and noted in the first land survey of this section in the late 1800s. Before that, going back before the survey, it had been a significant tree to the Cherokee who had worked this valley." His grandfather did not know in what way significant, only that the previous owners had been told this by someone who knew the local history, and that the previous owners had used the tree as their meat pole, and that they had sold the farm partly because they did not like the tree and had never felt comfortable near it, though they could not say exactly why. Roy had grown up on the farm and had never found the tree uncomfortable. It was just the tree, the meat pole tree, the place where the hunt ended. But he thought about what the tree had been before the farm, before the survey, before any family had been on this land. He thought about what a significant tree meant in the context of the people who had lived in this valley before everyone he had ever known. He thought about the thing hung on the branch in the exact manner of a field-dressed deer, hung with care, hung correctly, hung in the way of someone who knew how things were hung on this tree and had decided to use that knowledge. He thought, something has always used this tree. The family had been using it for 100 years. Before the family, the previous owners had used it. Before them, something else. For much longer than any of us have been here. And the family, his family, 4 generations, had been using the tree for their own purposes all this time, and the thing that had originally claimed this tree had been watching, and had been patient, and had continued its own use of the tree alongside theirs, unseen and undetected. Until the 1st October 3 years ago, when it had hung something in the manner of a deer. He thought about why it had done that. He thought about it for a long time. He arrived at an answer he did not find comforting, but that he found, in its way, comprehensible. He told Lena in March, when the snow was off the ground and the farm was beginning its spring work, and the white oak was bare against the pale sky with nothing on its branch and the gambrel clean on its hook. He told her what he had concluded. "It hung a deer on our tree," he said, "or what it thinks is the equivalent of a deer. It hung it the right way, the way it had watched us hang our deer, because it was showing us what it does. It was showing us that it uses the tree the same way we do, that it has been using the tree and has been harvesting from these mountains since before our family came here. Lena thought about that. It was introducing itself, she said. Roy looked at her. That's the word I kept coming back to, he said. Yes, it was introducing itself. After 100 years of watching our family use its tree, it decided to make itself known. Why now? Lena said. I don't know, he said. Maybe something changed. Maybe it decided we had been here long enough that we deserved to know it was here too. He paused. Or maybe something about the way we use the tree, the way we've used it for 4 generations, earned us the introduction. What do we do about it? Lena said. Roy looked at the white oak. Nothing, he said. We do nothing. We keep using the tree the way we've always used it. We treat what it leaves with the same respect we'd want it to treat what we leave. We don't disturb it, and we don't investigate it, and we don't try to understand more than it is chosen to show us. And if it puts something on the tree again? I'll cut it down and bury it the same as before, he said. Same as you would for anything your family harvests and does not need. You don't waste what the land gives you, and you don't leave it out where it becomes a problem. You put it back. He said it with the same tone he used when he described any other farm practice. Simple, practical, the understanding of someone who had been living with the land for 80 years and understood that the land was not simple and not safe, but was manageable if you paid attention and did your part. Lena looked at the tree. Does it know we know? She said. I believe so, Roy said. I believe it's known we know since the first time. That was the point. Does it watch us? She said. It has always watched us, he said. We just didn't know it. He said it without bitterness, as a fact that 4 generations of his family had been living inside without knowing it, and that he was the first one to know, and that he was now passing to the 5th generation the way all the important farm knowledge passed, quietly, carefully, with the expectation that it would be received with the seriousness it deserved. There was a 3rd occurrence. Last November, the 2nd season after Lena had been told. She found it this time. She was doing her morning chores before school, crossing the pasture in the early gray light, and she looked toward the tree and stopped. She stood at the edge of the pasture for a moment. Then she went back inside and got Roy. They went to the tree together. They stood at the base of it in the November dawn, both of them looking at what hung from the branch, and Roy was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "This one is different." "How?" Lena said. "The first 2 were, I understood them as announcement. This is something else." He studied it for another moment. "This is a gift." Lena looked at it. "How do you know?" she said. "Because I know how the first 2 looked, and I know how this looks, and they are not the same." He was quiet again. "The first 2 were hung the way we hang a deer. This is hung differently. The way something is hung when you are giving it to someone, when you are offering it." He looked at it for a long time. "I don't know what it is," he said. "I can't identify it, and I won't try to. But I know what it means. It means that whatever has been using this tree for as long as this tree has been here, has decided, for whatever reason, to extend to us the same courtesy we have been extending to it for 4 generations. What do we do with it?" Lena said. He thought for a long time. "We treat it the way we'd want it to treat what we leave," he said, "with respect. We don't investigate it. We don't try to understand more than we're meant to understand." He paused. "We put it back, carefully. the way you put back anything that came from the land and belongs to the land. They buried it together in the back pasture. Roy said a few words over it, not a prayer exactly, but words in the direction of whatever had left it, in acknowledgement of whatever gesture had been made. They went back inside. At breakfast, Roy poured his coffee and looked out the kitchen window toward the white oak and said, to no one in particular, "It's been 100 years. We're long overdue for an introduction." Lena looked at him. "You're not afraid of it," she said. "No," he said. "Why not?" He looked out the window at the old tree, at the branch worn smooth by a century of ropes and whatever had been using it far longer than that. "Because it has been here the whole time," he said. "It was here when my grandfather bought this land. It was here when the people before him were here. It has been watching 4 generations of my family use its tree with care and respect and gratitude for what the land provided." He drank his coffee. "Anything that has watched us that long and treated us that well deserves to be greeted with something other than fear." He said it the way he said things he had thought about carefully. Lena looked at the tree for a long time. "Does Dad know?" she said. "Not yet," he said. "I'll tell him before next season." "What will you tell him?" Roy set down his coffee cup. "What my grandfather should have told my father," he said. "What my father should have told me." He looked at the tree. "That the tree belongs to the farm, and the farm is in the mountain, and the mountain has its own tenants, and if you treat the mountain with respect, the mountain's tenants will extend you the same courtesy." He said it simply, the way he said all the important things. The way you said something you had waited 80 years to understand and were glad, finally, to understand. The Dunmore Farm, Bland County, Virginia. 112 acres on the Walker Mountain ridgeline. 4 generations. A white oak at the northwest corner of the property that has been used as a meat pole for 100 years. And for much longer than that, by something else. Something that hunts these mountains in its own way, in its own season, for its own purposes. Something that has watched the Dunmore family use its tree with respect and gratitude for 100 years, and has decided, after that 100 years of watching, to acknowledge them, to introduce itself, to offer them the same courtesy they have offered it without knowing they were offering it. Roy Dunmore is 81 years old. He has 8 more seasons in him, maybe 10 if his knees hold. He will keep using the tree. He will keep cutting down and burying whatever is left there by something he cannot name and does not need to name. He will tell his son before next season. His son will tell his daughter. The 5th generation will know what the first 4 did not. That is how it should have been from the beginning. That the land you farm is not only yours. That the tree you hang your deer from may have other uses that predate yours by centuries. That the mountains of Virginia have been inhabited, in every possible sense of that word, for much longer than any family's memory reaches. The next time you hang a deer on a tree that has been in your family a long time, look at that tree carefully. Look at the bark. Look at the branch. Ask yourself whether your family was the first to use it. Ask yourself who was here before you, and how long they have been watching. If the meat pole found you somewhere quiet and specific tonight, if you thought about your own meat pole tree, your own family's hunting ground, the places that have been part of your family's hunting life for generations, leave me a comment below. Tell me about your tree. Tell me how long it's been in the family. Tell me if you've ever looked at it and thought about what it was before your family found it. I want to hear those stories. I read every comment. Virginia Blood and Bone continues with more stories coming from the deep timber and the long ridges of Virginia's mountains. Subscribe and hit the bell. You don't want to miss what's coming. Good hunting out there. Treat the land well. Treat its other tenants the same way you'd want them to treat you. Most of the time, they're watching. Most of the time, they're keeping score. And sometimes, after long enough, they introduce themselves.